What is going on? Module 2, Managing Finances and Banking. So, as always, super important video, crucial to lay this out properly and really don't skip over this. I know a lot of people will skip over module 1, 2, 3 because it isn't the glitz and glamour, it's not the meat and potatoes, it's not where the money's made. But this, laying the foundations and setting things up in the right way, is so crucial. And I'm going to share some of the things that I've, some of the walls and hurdles that I've ran into further in this video with finances and cash flow. There's some horror stories, okay? So it's ultimately extremely crucial that we set this up right. Now, before we get into it, I want to point out I'm not a business advisor. I'm not qualified to give you tax advice. I'm not qualified to give you financial advice. What I am going to do is I'm going to share with you some of the ways, apps, services, tools, resources that I use in my business that I have had, that I've really enjoyed using and have helped me in operating the business, okay? So I'm just going to share with you personal preference, personal experience, not giving you advice, not telling you that this is what you need to do. Everyone's circumstances are going to be different, of course. So, for instance, let's just quickly touch on that. If you are like me, I'm 36, I have 3 young kids, we have a mortgage, we live in the UK. It's not the best time right now, and nor do we want to, but it's not the best time right now for us to start digital nomading and traveling around the world, right? We've got a baby, we've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, got a dog, it's just not applicable for us right now. And again, we're not really looking to do that anyway. We're enjoying where we stay. We've got a lovely house, beautiful location. We've got our grandparents and family around us for support network to help with the kids. So then it can, free up time for me and my fiance, right? So we can spend quality time together. Now, on the flip side of that, if you are 19, 20, 21, or even any age, and you don't have kids or you don't have, mortgage, or maybe your kids have left home and are at university, or they're living their own lives, then this might differ, right? Maybe you do want a digital nomad. Maybe you do want to bounce around the world and see the world. All the beauty of this business is you only need a laptop and an internet connection. Everything's online. We don't need stock. We don't need inventory. We don't need an office. We don't need, a team of staff and payroll and all this stuff, all the headaches that bring. We are so fluid in what we do. Everything can be operated from a laptop, right? We lived in Portugal for a year during 2021, 22, and I literally worked from a laptop. I didn't even bother. I did take my desktop out, but I didn't even bother setting it up. I just worked from the laptop. We'd go to the one of the beach bars or cafes, and I'd work from there, or go to a hotel cafe lobby and work from there, or just stay in the villa and work from there. Right? Everything was work. From my MacBook Pro. So, if you're in a position where you want to do that and that tickles your pickle, that's what you can do. And then obviously there are ways, and again, I'm not going to advise you on this, but if you are going to bounce around the world and you're not going to spend longer than 90 days in a specific country, then you could set up your tax residency to a place such as the UAE, which as of right now, currently Dubai and those type of places have 0% on personal income tax. Is that going to be true in the next year or 2 or 3 or 4? I don't know. It used to have 0% corporation tax as well until literally a few months ago, they bumped that up to 9%, which is still pretty good, but it's not 0%, right? And then if they've done that for the corporation tax, are they now going to do that for the personal income tax, right? So again, maybe UAE isn't the place to set up your tax residency. However, right now, it's a good place. It's still 0% for personal income and capital gains. So you may want to do that, where you can stay there for 3 months of the year, making you a tax resident, and then explore the rest of the world. Bounce around, spend a month in different places, go to Thailand, go to, South America, go to different parts of Europe, whatever, right? Well, then that allows you to pay 0% personal income tax because you're a tax resident of Dubai or the UAE, and you're not spending more than 90 days in any specific other country, which would then potentially hold you as a tax resident there as well. So Yeah, again, probably butchered that, but hopefully it makes sense. So that could be something you could do, right? If you were fluid and you were able to move and travel, that might be something you want to do. It's not a bad shout. I think if I was, 21, 22 years old before kids, that's probably what I'd be doing. I'd be, seeing the world and exploring. So, okay. So let's get into it, right? So for me, again, kids, family, I set up a limited company in the UK. I actually have multiple companies. I have an LLC in the US. I have a UAE company as well. But for my affiliate marketing business, which is owned and operated in the UK, we have a limited company, okay? Me and my fiance, Tina, are both directors of that company, okay? We both own the company, 50% each. Now, what that allows us to do in the UK is we can both take or pay ourselves minimum wage, okay, which is, I think, £12,000 in the UK per year. What that allows us to do in the UK is the first £12,000 of personal income is tax-free. It's not taxed, okay? So our first £12,000, our annual salary, we don't pay tax on that £12,000. Then how we bolster and bulk up our income is we draw dividends from the company profits. Now in the UK, dividends, again, don't quote me on this, but dividends are taxed. The first £3,000 or £3,500 are 0%. And then anything after that up until, £45,000, I think is 7%. Again, don't quote me. Basically, what we can do is we can each take a combined, not combined together, but with our £12,000 salary and then dividends, I can earn £50,000 or around about. So can Tina, and we can pay minimal tax where we only pay the 7% on the dividends between £3,500 to whatever else, right? That's quite a tax efficient way of doing things in the UK. All right. Now, let's not forget, because we're drawing dividends from the company profits, those company profits are also taxed at the corporation tax. So in the UK right now, it's gone up to 25% corporation tax. So the company profits will also pay 25% tax. Okay. So we also have to factor that in as well, which is just part and parcel of it. Again, there's better places where you can set up business. The reason why we have that business and keep it in the UK is we live here. We operate a business from the UK. It would be different if we had a director from, living somewhere else, because we could then potentially say that it's, also operated from another country. We don't, which is what we do with our Dubai company. We have a partner there who is a resident out there. And then obviously that allows us to say, well, it is owned and operated from Dubai. And obviously we just happen to live in the UK and also shareholders in that company. So that's potentially something you can do. There are services, again, I don't want to go too much. And again, this isn't advice, but I have seen services where you can pay an annual fee to have a non-shareholding director sit on the company, which would then allow it to be operated from the company. Again, is it legit? I don't know, but I've seen those services. I don't know if Dubai has them. I would say that they do, but I've seen them in Malta, in Cyprus, and a couple of other places. So, who knows? But yeah, that's obviously an option. Again, I'm not going to go too far into it because I don't really understand it or know how it works, but yeah, there we go. All right, so we have that limited company. So there is the equivalent in most countries, LLCs in the US. So again, I don't know how the dividend taxes work in the US. It's going to be different than the UK, but you need to know what they are before you go down that route. I would say it's going to be more beneficial than if you were to set up as a sole trader. Okay. Another reason why a limited company is better than sole trader is, as a limited company, if the company was to ever be sued or go into crazy debt or something was to happen, you couldn't have your home repossessed or any assets repossessed, whereas that are in your personal name. However, if you were a sole trader and the business is your name and also your mortgage is your name, etc., then if anything was to happen in that business, then your personal assets could be liable as well, right? So, that's another reason why a limited company is, or the equivalent is, again, I say equivalent. I don't know what the rules are in the US with LLCs. In the UK, I'm talking about, again, personal experience, personal preference. You need to do a bit of research on what's going to work best for you, okay? All right, so the next step would be to set up business banking. And we're going to go through some of the different options out there. Obviously, most countries are going to have their own bank or centralized banks. In the UK, there's Barclays, HSBC is here, Santander is here. There's a bunch, NatWest, there's a bunch of different banks that you can bank with. And obviously, it makes sense to open up an account. The way I like to structure my banking account is I like to have 3 different accounts inside of my banking. So if I open up my banking app, I can see I've got 3 different accounts in that banking app, okay? And one will be the basically main account, which is where money gets deposited and also expenses come from, okay? So that would be my main account. And then I'd have another account where I can then take profit and move it into that account. And that's where we pay our dividends from and also pay our corporation tax. Dividend. That's where we pay our dividend from, the profits, okay? And then also a tax account. So that's where we pay our taxes from, okay? So again, most banks will allow you to set up 3 individual accounts, all inside the same, your business name account, but you have 3 different accounts that you can deposit and take money from, in and out of. The reason why I like to do this, there's a book called Profit First, which is a pretty good book, but it explains this and it goes into even more. I think they have 5 accounts. But the reason why I like to do this is it just allows me to know exactly what we've got. So how we do this would be, again, we'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a second, but let's say we get a $100,000 payment that gets deposited into the main account, okay? Well, if I'm operating, and again, we'll explain this in a second, but if I reinvest 80%, okay, then I'm going to keep 80% in that account. I'm going to take 20% and then move it into profit. So that would be $20,000 going into the profit account. And then I would take 25% of that profit and move it into the tax. Okay, so then, that'd be $5,000 being moved into the tax, which would pay the corporation tax. So then my $100,000, my $20,000 profit, okay, because the $80,000 that's staying in the main account is going to be used for expenses, for adding to ad spend, for paying contractors, for, paying tools and services and softwares and whatever else we use, okay? So again, we'll go into a bit more detail on that. So what I like to do to start with, and this is how I started, is I set myself a float. So if you're starting out with this, it's always beneficial to have a float. And the bigger the float, the larger the float, the better it's going to be. For me, I started with $5,000, okay? So that was allowing me to spend X amount per day in ad spend and start generating revenue, and then allowed to tick me over until the first payout arrives, which is usually 2 weeks after, okay? So I needed to factor that in, okay? I needed to make sure if I'm going to spend $200 per day in ad spend, after 14 days, that's $2,800, okay? And I haven't been paid yet. And then that first payout is only going to be from the first week, okay? So maybe the first week I only make $300 back. And then the second week I make $1,100. So we'd have to factor that in, okay? So I think starting with a bigger float is going to be better. The bigger, the better, but minimum $1,000, okay? Again, that might mean that you have to spend $50 a day to, get things going until those payouts start landing where you can then hopefully profitably reinvest that profit, okay? And start bulking up. Now, for the initial first few weeks, months, you might not want to take much profit out. Maybe you want to invest 100%, and that's what I did as well. Fortunately, I had income coming in from an agency that I was still sort of bringing myself out of, but I still had a couple of clients that were paying, retainers, and I was able to still generate some income from that, which could pay the bills and make sure everything was good, which then allowed me to reinvest 100% of the revenue generated from the affiliate, okay? So again, it's completely up to you, but I think a float of a minimum $1,000, ideally $5,000 is going to be beneficial because it's going to allow you to start scaling in the, whilst even waiting. So if you started at $100 a day and then after week 1 you started going to $300 a day, you would still have enough money in the float to cover that until the first payouts start arriving. So yeah, again, it's going to differ. Not everyone is going to have $5,000 readily available. There's a few ways around that. You could, for instance, what I did when I first ever started business was I basically went around the house. I went through my wardrobe, anything that I didn't want anymore, anything that I didn't wear or had outgrown or obviously got a bit of a belly. So, was a little bit too little or so outgrown, or anything that I wasn't into, old mobile phones, consoles that I didn't play anymore, laptops that I wasn't using anymore, anything that wasn't being used. I just basically put it into a laundry basket almost and pictured it. And at the time sold it on eBay because that was the app. I think there's now, God, what is there? Vinted. I mean, there's a few different things that you could sell on. I sold it on eBay. And I think, from, collecting everything, I had some designer jackets and, a couple of old mobile phones, which weren't too old, but still, made 80 quid from one phone. I think, 50 quid from another phone. I sold my PlayStation at the time, which I can't remember what it was now, which PlayStation it was, but probably a PS3, an Xbox also. So, I was selling these things, and in total, I think I made like around £1,000. So that £1,000 was then, at the time, that wasn't for the affiliate marketing thing, but at the time, I then started buying and selling stuff. So I started buying Blackberries. That they were the rage. So that's how far back we're going. Blackberries were still the rage. So that's what you can do. There's things that you can do. You can ask for extra shifts at work if you have a job. You can go and get a second job if you want to start bolstering up. You can cut down on expenses. You can sell the car. What I don't recommend you do is I don't recommend you go into debt to fund this, okay? Because there's no guarantee that this is going to work. Again, I've paved out a path. And I think, if you give it enough time and effort, it should work, right? It worked for me. So the potential is there. But obviously, don't remortgage the house. Don't go and take a loan. Don't whack everything on a credit card when you haven't got things profitable. Credit cards come into use later in the line. But for now, I would leave credit cards alone. I wouldn't put anything on a credit card because you do not want to get into debt. You don't want to get desperate with this, okay? I think anything that you can sort of generate yourself is going to be beneficial. So if that means going around the house and selling old stuff that you no longer use or want, that's a great way of doing it. If you can generate a couple of £1,000 from doing that, then fantastic. If you want even more of a float, you can start buying and selling, which is what I was doing. Again, Blackberries aren't really about anymore, but you could do the same for old iPhones. You can basically buy stuff that you see selling at a good price, buy it and then relist it and resell. Again, there's potential risk there, but it could generate you some extra money, right? So there's a few different ways you can do this. There's a few different ways, but I really do recommend that you make sure you have some kind of a float before you start. Don't just start when you've only got $100 in the bank, because you're only going to spend day 1 or 2, and then you're going to have to wait, okay, until you've got more money. That stop-start is not what we want. We want this to be able to, consistently grow and scale. By stopping and starting, if we launch a campaign, run it for 2 days, then have to turn off because we've got no money left. And then a week later we have money, so we turn it on for 3 days and then turn it off. And then a week, it's just not going to work like that. It's going to be a pain in the backside. I really recommend you spend a little bit more time gathering a float. It could just be $1,000, okay? Again, ideally 5,000, but 1,000 would be fine as well to start with. But crucial to have that float. Okay, I'm just going to get a swig of water. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to decide on a majority percentage of profit that you'll reinvest into the business or revenue, okay? So this would cover ad spend, tools and resources that you have, masterminds, forums that you might be a member of, team payouts, etc., okay? How I do this, again, when I started out, when I had that other income coming in, I reinvested 100% back into ad spend, tools, resources, etc. Then as I then started generating more money and replaced the my income. I then started putting 80 to 90% of money back into the business, and then taking 10 to 20% out into the profit account. Okay. And then obviously taking the tax out, paying dividends from that, from the profit account. Okay. So again, this is going to be different. Maybe you just want to do 50-50. For me, I wanted to grow as fast as possible. In the first year of doing affiliate marketing, again, starting with $5,000, did not reinvest any other outside money, but starting with $5,000, I think we generated over $1.5 million in the first year. Okay. The second year we did over 5 million. The third year we've done over 5 million, and the fourth year over 5 million. So up here behind me, I have 3 ClickBank Diamond Awards, 2022, 23, and 24. Okay. For each of those Diamond Awards, you have to generate over $5 million in a calendar year. And then I also have a Platinum up at the top, and a Digistore one, 2 MaxWeb ones, and 2 BuyGoods ones over there. So, this is all from revenue generated, okay? Now, I don't think I would have been able to achieve all of these as fast if I had been investing or only taking 50%, okay? Again, it's going to depend on your circumstances. It's going to depend on what you're in this for. If this is just a quick cash grab, then by all means, set it to what you want. But if you're actually going to have, consistency, and you want to scale this as fast and aggressively as possible, then the less you take into profit, the faster you'll get there. The more you're going to have to reinvest, okay? All right, so how this works is every time receiving a payout. So for ClickBank, that could be either once a week or twice a week. For MaxWeb, that might be 3 times a week. Whenever you receive a payout, you move 10 or 20%, whatever you're going with, into your profit account, okay? Then whatever your corporation tax and other taxes that you might have to factor in, take from that profit and move it into the tax account, okay? And then you can use the remaining 80 to 90% in the main account to reinvest into the business, whether that be to pay for ad spend, to pay the credit card bills, to pay staff, to pay, spy tools, trackers, etc., all right? Then I also want to open up eMoney accounts. So this has been a big one for me. So I have tried quite a few different eMoney accounts. So the eMoney accounts are basically electronic money accounts. TransferWise, which is now Wise, Revolut, Payoneer, Airwallex. There's a few, all right? And I think there's probably tons that I don't know about. But those are the main ones that I'm aware of, okay? Now, I've tried Wise, Revolut, and Payoneer. I've never tried Airwallex. It looks great. When it first came out, I applied, but because I was an affiliate business, they didn't touch me. This is going back maybe 2 years now, maybe even a little bit longer, actually. But I couldn't get accepted. For some reason, they didn't want to accept me. I know of, and I know for a fact, there are affiliates that solely run affiliate businesses that have been accepted. So whether they've changed policy or whether they, Billy Bulled them and told them they weren't affiliate business, they were something else, I don't know. But Airwallex seem to be, from what I hear, seem to be good. Wise is one that I continue to use. I really like Wise a lot. However, they do have downsides. One of the downsides for Wise is the limit on monthly spend. Okay, so there's you obviously can have virtual cards with TransferWise, but the whole limit across all online transactions is $30,000. That's not a lot. That's okay to pay for tools and resources, okay, if you're paying by card. That's not a limit on like transfers, like wire transfers and ACH transfers. That's unlimited, or is unlimited to the fact that you won't have to worry about limits if you've got decent revenue coming in. But card payments, so like putting your card in to pay for things online, $30,000 is the monthly limit, which is not that much, okay? Because when I first started out, here's one of the walls that I ran into. I just used Wise. I'd been using Wise in my agency to receive USD payouts. I was running an agency in the US, but I'd never really spent that much ad spend, right? So When I started scaling my affiliate business in the first few months, I found out that I need to spend more than $30,000 a month. And I was using Wise cards. So I then went to Revolut. So I opened up a Revolut account. And Revolut offsets that to a degree. Revolut, you can have unlimited or up to 100, I think, virtual cards, okay? And each card can have $100,000 limit per month. So if you had 10 cards, each with $100,000 limit, that's $1 million limit, okay, per month. The issue is, obviously, it's a bit of a blag to have to keep changing cards, and then one card gets declined by Facebook, which then leads to your account getting shut down. It's not ideal, all right? So, again, issues there, right? Revolut also became a big issue for me, and I no longer use Revolut, although I do rate it, but Revolut became a big issue for me when I was in Portugal. And as we were running an affiliate business, we weren't invoicing, we didn't have invoices, or we weren't sending invoices to ClickBank or anything like that. And Revolut, really got its knickers in a twist, asking for invoices for like 3 or 4 different transactions, which were deposits from ClickBank and other affiliate networks. And after explaining that to them and sending them written letters and transaction reports, meaning every transaction that I generated a commission for, to Revolut, still wasn't good enough. They wanted invoice. So I ended up shutting my account down with them. And, I've never gone back to them, because that really got my back up a little bit, that they held my money for that. So a bit of an issue there as well. Now, another issue with eMoney accounts as you start to scale is if you have large transactions being deposited. So for me, I had my biggest transactions, I want to say at the end of 21, maybe at the end of 22. Maybe 22. So I had my biggest transactions in 22, where we were having like $500,000, $700,000 deposits being made in one payout multiple times per week. So like 2 or 3 times a week, we were having $500,000 deposited. And, this happened at Wise and Revolut. Their transactions were paused. So that money was not accessible. They were holding it because they wanted to check money laundering. So I had to, again, have every transaction. This is why I knew that I could try and send this to Revolut to try and offset this. It didn't work. But for these, payouts being paused, I had to download reports of the transactions. So, you can imagine a $500,000 payout from ClickBank, there being thousands of different multiple transactions. So I had to, pull all those off. I then have to have a written letter from ClickBank saying that I'd received that money and it was legit and it wasn't, fraudulent. And I had to send that. And I had to sort of do this, the first one hit, the first time it got held, I think it was like maybe a $350,000 payout. I was like, oh no, because I was dependent on that money having to pay the ad spend. I was already in debt with the ad spend with the, it was a post-fund agency account. And I had to pay the ad spend with that money. So then I was like, oh shit. So that really scuppered me. I had to then grovel to the agency provider and basically say, look, I'm sorry, like Wise's or Revolut have held my funds. Is it okay to have it a couple of days? And they held it for 48 hours. Now, when you're scaling hard and you're spending $100,000, $150,000 a day, and you're making a lot of profit from that, you don't want any downtime. You want to be running ads all the time and really milking it as much as possible, right? Profiting as much as you can. So that really scuppered it up, right? I had my payment, it was just a stress. Fortunately, the agency were okay with me, and trusted me enough to allow me to I guess, tick me over. But yeah, it was a stressful time. And then, I was then aware that any payout over, I think, $250,000 was going to get paused. And obviously, the more payouts, the more bigger payouts that came, the more lenient they became. Wise especially became a little bit more lenient. They were expecting me to have higher payouts, and obviously I gained a bit more trust. But the $500,000 again red flagged. And again, I had to, ahead of time, I already had stuff. I knew the process, get a letter, get the transactions pulled off. I also had a direct contact there that I could send them straight away, even ahead of time before the payout landed and got paused. So that's what I do. And it still get held, but it could be released in like 12 hours, which is a lot better than 48 hours, meaning I could clear any debts that I needed to clear, pay off any expenses that we needed to pay off, profit, blah, blah, blah. But that's something that you have to hold into account and prepare for, that maybe at this current time, if you're low scale and you're not really spending that much, it's nothing you have to worry about. But if you're going to really take this seriously and scale to those levels, you're going to have to be aware that if you're dependent on Wise or Revolut accepting the money, then if you're getting paid more than $250,000 in one payout, there's a potential that you are going to have that payout halted, and you are going to have to generate some stuff to get it fast tracked. And also, you're going to have good relationships with the agency providers, etc., etc. This is where a credit card comes in handy. This is where also services like Junie come in handy. Okay, so Junie, and also before we move on, the e-money accounts now also, most of them offer 1% back, cash back. So you can, spend on your card. Say you spend $30,000 on Wise throughout the month, then you can get $300 back at the end of the month. Same with Payoneer, same with Revolut. I've never dabbled to see how negotiable those terms are. I would say they are negotiable, which leads me on to Junie. So Junie, and I did actually open these up to go through in the different tabs. I haven't touched them, but Junie is, let's actually go over to Junie, because Junie will tell you what Junie is. Well, I was hoping it would, but it's not. So let's see if we can get to Junie's homepage. It's not going to be junie.ca. It's not going to be junie.o either. I'll get there, guys. Oh, wow. oneday.co. All right, here we go. I apologize. So, take control of your cash flow. Gives businesses in digital commerce the financial tools and intelligence you need to manage and ease cash flow and make smarter decisions much faster. Okay? So I'll leave this up. You can have a little read through, pause it, or visit it. It'll be linked below as well. There's a few things you can do with Junie. It's actually added different things as well in recent time. One of the awesome things is obviously the cash flow. Now, the cash back, 1% I think is starting. This is negotiable. So if you earn some trust and build a relationship with your rep there's definitely room for you to move that up. I'm not going to share exactly how much I get from Junie, but it's decent. Okay. It's better than Wise. It's better than Revolut and Payoneer. And it allows me to, get decent cash back. Now, one of the other beautiful things about Junie is they have capital. So they can also, once you've built that trust, you do have to do some company checks. They want to see that you're making money and your company's in good standing. But if you do that, they'll also allow you to, they'll provide you cash flow. This could be anywhere from, a few $1,000s to a few $100,000. So imagine if you are running ads, for your own ad accounts, and you're able to, borrow $250,000 from Junie at a low interest, then that's insane, right? Now, I've never used the capital. I've never had to use it, and it's interest-free. So access interest-free capital. So it's not even got an interest, right? Paid back in up to 90 days to repay. That's insane, okay? So that allows you to really help with cash flow, right? There's no more powerful thing than being able to use that and utilize interest-free capital as cash flow, right? You can invest, $250,000 into ads, especially if you're profitable, right? If you're well profitable and you just want, for instance, at the time when I was, getting those $500,000 deposits, that would have been prime time for me to take capital from outside, right? Push as much money as I can get hold of into this campaign, because it's just kicking out profit at high scale. So, there's not always campaigns that you have like that. Sometimes those campaigns can break when you get to a certain level of ad spend. This campaign at the time was just insane. You could spend $200,000 a day and kick out 40-50% ROI, which is ridiculous. So, in times like that, having access to capital is insane. Really is. Okay. So, all right. So Junie is a really good place. Now, another thing about Junie is you can integrate your other banking apps. So Wise integrates. I'm not sure if the centralized banks like Barclays and Santander do, but I know Wise integrates. I assume Revolut does as well. But also Facebook ads and Google ads integrate. And I guess TikTok as well. And maybe even native all integrate into your Junie account. So then inside your Junie account, you can see exactly how much has been spent, how much has been made, blah, blah, blah. You can interlink, and integrate a ton of different things into Junie, which is just hugely beneficial, because then what you have is you have a hub where you can manage everything from, or have an overview of everything in one spot instead of having to jump to different tabs and different apps. It's a brilliant thing. So Junie, I really highly recommend. I'll drop links to these on the Google Doc and also underneath this video as well in school. So check that out. And then finally, credit. Okay, so with banking and your business. So as you start generating money and you bring money in and you've got revenue coming in and profit and everything else, credit cards are a great way of, again, getting capital, especially at low interest, right? So American Express, for instance, the Platinum card, business card for American Express is probably the best that I know of. Not only, can you have that capital and build it up, so then, you could spend a couple £100,000 or dollars in a day or two. So not only do you have that cash flow, but you also earn points, and those points can be redeemed for a number of things. But in our business, especially in the affiliate marketing game, there's events all around the world, right? So I should have been in Mexico for ClickBank Diamond, but something came up last minute. But I was in Vegas for the Affiliate Summit in January. I was in Barcelona for Affiliate World. I was in Dubai for Affiliate World. I was in Idaho for ClickBank Diamond last year. There's events, multiple events, 4 or 5 big events every year. And then there's all these smaller events as well that you can go to. Well, if you've got, your business points from your credit card, you can go business class, you can go first class with some of the top airlines. That's what I use my points for. So it just allows you to, offset the $15,000 cost to go first class to halfway around the world with Emirates by paying it on your with your points, right? From ad spend. When you get to a good level of scale, you can quite easily spend $500,000 to a couple of $1 million per month on ads. All right. And, that's a heck of a lot of points to put towards air miles every month. You could go somewhere every month for free without having to pay anything. Take the family with you, right? So that's what we're doing actually next week. We're going to Dubai. Again, obviously we've got a company out there, but we're taking the kids with us this time. It's all been paid for through the business points. Probably shouldn't say that because it probably shouldn't be using it for the family, but it's a nice little, we had all those points racked up, so why not? All right, so that wraps up managing finances and banking. I appreciate that was a super long video. Hopefully not too boring. Hopefully some insights shared there as well. But yeah, hopefully you got something from it. Drop any comments, questions in the community, and I will get to them. Cheers, guys.